Hi guys, so we're on Native American literature. The first learning target is the same, to be able to demonstrate your knowledge of it. The second one is to listen to a story told orally and distill key points. So when you guys go to college, one of the things you'll have to do is take notes when your professors are lecturing, and 99% of the time their PowerPoints are going to be online. So there's not really a point in writing down everything you see on the screen. It's more important to write down what they say. I mean, I also had a professor in college who didn't use PowerPoints or anything visual at all, and he just lectured. And it can be really frustrating to get down everything that the person is saying because you can't write that fast. So just some practice taking notes when you're listening to someone. So in this case, we're going to be looking at mythology, Native American mythology. So we're going from a nonfiction text, Night Flying Woman, to a fiction text. And the essential questions are, in the creation myth you guys are going to listen to today, what are the key details and how would you use them to then retell it? And secondly, what can we infer about the Onondaga tribe from the myth that you're going to listen to? So, first of all, I want to talk about oral tradition. So, by definition, it's a community's cultural and historical traditions passed down by word of mouth from one generation to another without being written. So, I mean, you guys have stories in your families that have been passed down. For example, I have a great, I'm not sure how many greats to put in there, grandfather who was from Sweden, and when he was just a teenager, he told his mom he was going down to look at the boats, and he got on one to America and never went back. So that's a story that's been passed down from generation to generation about our family's history. So different cultures, different families, different groups might pass down their own history from one generation to the next without it ever being written down. They can also pass down literature, stories, law, yes, like literal laws, but also just like rules, like how you should behave. And just other knowledge, like I know the Native Americans passed down a lot of knowledge about like herbs and medicine, and it was not written down, it was just by word of mouth. So most of the time things are transmitted through speech, but occasionally they are through song. Sometimes it's easier to remember when something is sung. Western scholars used to think that Native Americans didn't have any literature by academic standards because by definition literature is written, and they didn't have any stories that were written. So there's this paradox of something called oral literature. So paradox is like, it doesn't seem like it makes sense, but it does. They're kind of contradictory, almost opposites, right? Because oral is said and literature is written. So Native Americans, they do have stories, but these were just told orally. So, Native Americans have a rich oral tradition. It's found across all Native American groups, and something that is very, very important to that culture. So, if you take a minute to just think about mythology and what you already know about it, if you took 10th grade at Spring Lake Park High School last year, sorry, you studied it. So, the definition of a myth is a traditional story, especially one concerning the early history of a people, or to explain some natural or social phenomenon, and typically involving supernatural beings or events. So, looking at ology means the study of, so mythology is the study of myths. You've probably also heard psychology, biology, etc. Ology is always the study of. So, Native American mythology, even though there's many different Native American tribes, they don't all share a single unified body of mythology. Each tribe has their own. Now, sometimes these overlap and they're very similar, but on the whole, they each have their own set of myths. So, all of the tribal groups develop stories about like how the world was created, how the first people appeared, the place of humans in the universe, and the lives and deeds of gods, goddesses, and heroes. Oftentimes, underlying the myths is this idea that spiritual forces can be sensed through the natural world, including clouds, winds, plants, and animals. And lastly, many of the stories explain how the actions of gods, heroes, and ancestors gave the earth its present form, which is the one we're going to focus on today, which is a creation myth. So, we're looking at a creation myth from the Onondaga tribe called Earth on Turtle's Back. It's actually a YouTube video, and there's a link attached to the assignment. But what you're going to do today is to take notes as you watch on key details that would help you to retell the story. Now, when you take your notes, you're going to just want to focus on words or phrases that are essential. So don't feel like you have to write in full sentences. You don't have time. Just write enough that it'll jog your memory as to what happens next. Because then what you're going to do is, after you've watched the video a couple times and you feel confident in the notes that you've taken, then you're going to audio record yourself retelling the story, just like Native Americans wouldn't have taken notes, but they would have heard the story and then they would have retold it to others, to their children. And so we're trying to give you an authentic experience as much as we can in listening to a story, repeatedly and then retelling it. So if I just take a second to show you your assignment. So you've already watched the video lesson. Then you're going to watch the creation myth, Earth on Turtle's Back, and take notes, which is right here. Third, you're going to open up the attached self-assessment document in Notability, and you can actually audio record yourself in Notability by hitting the microphone button at the top. I don't actually have Notability on my computer, otherwise I'd show you, but when you open it in Notability, the microphone button will be like somewhere right over here. So when you do your audio recording, you're going to start by saying your first and last name and that it's a creation myth. Then you're going to use the details, like your notes that you took, to retell the story, but you're going to try to tell it in the form of a story and not just like reading off bullet points, right? Like pretend you're telling, your children, right before bed, like that. So I'm going to just take a second and pause, because when you retell your story, you're going to self-assess yourself. So just highlight. Do you feel like you missed major details? You'll highlight there, like key things in the story. If you feel like you got all the key details, but it doesn't really feel like you're telling a story, it more feels like you're reading bullet points, or you're reading like a written summary, then it would be here. And if you feel like you got all the key details, and like when you're telling it, it's like you're not reading off a script, it's like you're actually genuinely telling a story and it feels like a story, then that's here. When you're done telling the story, I want you to explain what the myth tells us about the Native American culture and what in the story makes you think that. So at first you might be like, I don't know, because it's not explicit, right? Like you have to infer. So if this was their story, if these were their characters, if these were the events, if these were the ideas in the story, then what does this tell us about this group of people, right? So it's supposed to be hard, but not impossible. So if you try, then you'll highlight here, but you just don't feel like you did a very good job. If you come up with an inference, like I think it tells us this, and you've explained why you think that, because I think it tells us this about them, because in the story it said, right? Then that goes there. Sorry again. And if you feel like you have really thoughtful inferences, maybe multiple or really developed explanations, like it was longer than a sentence, then you would highlight here. So lastly, what you're going to do is you're going to tick this off, tick this line. I will submit this self-assessment. And an important thing to note is that when you're submitting this Notability document, if you did your recording on here as well, when you go to share it, before you hit the Schoology icon, you have to hit the button recording. So it like turns it on, it turns it green. And then that way I'll get this document as a PDF and I'll get an audio file of you telling the story. So just to recap, you are watching this creation myth, taking notes, opening this in Notability, the self-assessment, audio recording yourself retelling Earth on Turtle's Back on this same document. When you're done telling the story, then you're explaining what can be inferred about the tribe. This can be on the same audio recording, a new audio recording, or you can write it out if you forgot. And then you're going to complete the self-assessment and you're going to turn it into this Dropbox, Lesson 6 Dropbox. But when you're turning it in, you're going to like hit upload and then I forgot what it says, but you click on the button and then you have to hit the recordings button and turn it green before you send it to Schoology. So if you have any questions, please email me. We're going to be doing these audio recordings for the next few lessons, so we want to make sure we get it sorted right away. All right, thanks.